I'll try to sum it up and then explain my reasoning. There are four main things I'd consider as problematic when one is successful, whether financially or socially or otherwise: the threat of complacency, the jealousy of others, the risk of overreach, and the dangers of overconfidence. Bob is an engineer. A pretty good one. The bridges he's built have all stood strong against the worst the weather and even earthquakes could throw at them. He's asked by the Emperor of Bigland to build him the biggest bridge ever conceived, crossing the giant, 4,000 kilometers straight between Bigland and Hugeland. Immediately Bob sees a number of major obstacles with this, which seem near insurmountable, but he's gotten over impossible before, right? He takes the job, and agrees to a deadline he just barely considers feasible, confident he'll pull a rabbit out of his hat. Bob's rival, Ed, is arrogantly confident he can make a better bridge than Bob, and goes to the Emperor. He says, "I could do it in 3 years, and yet you give it to Bob who promises it in 5? Ed then shows the Emperor all manner of fancy charts and graphs, none of which mean anything but which he makes much of. The Emperor, fooled by Ed's silvery tongue and mastery of statistical BS, goes to Bob and demands he adjusts the deadline to meet his new target of 3 years, or that Ed will get the job. PR campaigns and announcements are made to all the populace of Bigland, that Bob will do this in 3 years' time. Bob's protests get him no response, and now he's got a deadline that's gone from barely feasible to entirely unfeasible. He makes a valiant effort, rallying together his workforce like a hero, spending all hours of night and day, even revolutionizing the construction industry with new techniques. With much argument and pleading, he even gets an extension of 6 months for his bridge. After 3.5 years, Bob has successfully built a 4,000 kilometers bridge. He is proud. Until the bridge collapses 3 weeks later, killing thousands. Bob is flabbergasted, devastated, and due for execution as soon as the Emperor signs the writ. While Bob had not taken shortcuts, Ed had successfully bribed several of his men to sabotage the construction in key areas. Bob was never to find this out, and he'd never thought to question why some of his men seemed so much better off than others, chalking it up to good fortune or lucky investments. Knowing the scale of the project and what Ed stood to gain, Bob had been recklessly over-trusting. Bob was certainly admirable, but unwise. Bob's overconfidence led him to take on what was ultimately overreach, and his complacency about Ed's jealousy led to his downfall. Excuse my crude fable, but I'm hoping it serves as a good example. This isn't the only way it could or likely even would play down, and any of the risks created by success could cause problems by itself. Someone becoming complacent at their job, doing something negligent, and being fired, for example. If one's relationship is going successfully as such, it can become a problem when one takes the other for granted, or asks too much of them. The key to maintaining continued success is, I think, awareness. Be aware of your limits, and of the people around you. Be aware of when you need to sharpen up, and when others are sharpening the metaphorical knife. And of course, act appropriately and decisively when required.